Hello and welcome to the Friday, October 31st, 2025 edition of the SANS Internet Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich, recording today from Jacksonville, Florida. And this episode is brought to you by the SANS.edu Graduate Certificate Program in Cybersecurity Leadership. This week, I noticed some new HTTP request headers in our honeypot logs, and these HTTP request headers are related to bug bounty programs. There is an X request purpose header. The value is just research for this header, and then also specific headers for specific bug bounty programs like HackerOne and BugCrowd. There are a couple of bug bounties that I was able to find that actually ask researchers to use these specific headers. As always, when you're talking request headers like this, nothing is guaranteed. It's very easy for someone, of course, to impersonate a researcher using those headers. And then, of course, there is no guarantee that researchers will actually use these headers as they're conducting scans for their bug bounty research. I assume that companies participating in these bug bounty programs try to use these headers to maybe figure out how many of the requests that they're seeing are related to bug bounties, and at least to be able to notify researchers that are well-behaved, that are actually using the correct headers in case something is going wrong here, in case of like a denial of service or something like this, so they can reach out to the researcher and ask them maybe to stop their scans or throttle them as necessary. Interesting curiosity here. I think the value of it is overall limited and certainly nothing that should be used to filter or not filter certain requests. And Proton, the company behind the Proton email service as well as the Proton VPN, has now come up with an interesting new project. That's the Data Breach Observatory. The goal of this Data Breach Observatory is to shed a light on breaches that may not have been reported to the public or where the breached entity is actually even unaware themselves that they got breached. They have the initial website up here, and so far they have about 800 breaches listed. They say the top businesses that they're seeing exposed here are retail in particular, but then also small, medium-sized businesses, which I believe these are common targets. And of course, particular small, medium-sized businesses may either not have the capability to actually detect the attack and the breach, or they may feel like they can sort of slip underneath the radar. In the past, sadly, I've often observed that actually the best thing a company can do is not to talk about the breach, because then the news won't pick up on it, typically in particular for smaller companies like this, and the breach will overall go unnoticed without too much impact on the company itself. So interesting approach here. They're claiming they're looking at various dark web sources in order to compile that data. We'll have to see how it all works out, and I hope they at the very least are notifying and contacting any organizations that they find breached here. And government cybersecurity agencies from the US, Canada, and Australia have collaborated on a pretty neat document, Microsoft Exchange Server Security Best Practices. The document is not very much in depth. It sort of just covers different topics that you should consider as you are configuring and maintaining Exchange. But the real value I find in this document is the long list of references that then leads you to additional guidelines on how to accomplish some of the suggested things, like configuring authentication correctly, enabling Kerberos, and doing all the other good things with a Microsoft Exchange server. It has been a huge target in the past. Of course, one of the items on the list here is also make sure that you're not using an end-of-life version of Microsoft Exchange, which of course we just had the issue where 2019 and such did become end-of-life with the last Microsoft Patch Tuesday. And then we have a new patch for users of MOVEit Transfer. The reason I mention it today is that this is probably something that you may want to get a handle on before the weekend. MOVEit has been the target of compromise in the past and has been used to compromise networks for ransomware and the like. There is very little detail about this vulnerability. It just says of an uncontrolled resource consumption vulnerability. It does imply that it's possible to execute arbitrary code with this vulnerability. It's likely sort of one of those web shell style vulnerabilities where you can upload a web shell and execute it. Hard to tell whether or not it does require authentication or not. They did assign it a CVSS score of 8.2, which is high. It's not critical. Still something that you probably want to get ahead of and follow here Progress's guidance in how to address this vulnerability. Well, and that's it for today. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for liking and subscribing to this podcast. And as always, talk to you again on Monday. Bye.